Before we start the introduction, that there will be an opportunity to ask questions of Harry towards the end of the presentation. We expect it to take no longer than an hour in total. So I'll introduce Harry. Harry founded the Reshoring Initiative to bring 5 million manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. after working for high-end machine tool supplier GF AG Charmilles. Harry started as president in 1985 and retired at the end of 2010 as chairman emeritus. Largely due to the success of the Reshoring Initiative, Harry was inducted into the Industry Week Manufacturing Hall of Fame in 2010 and was named Quality Magazine's 2012 Quality Professional of the Year and FAB Shop's Magazine Manufacturing Person of the Year. Harry participated actively in President Obama's insourcing forum at the White House. He's won the Economist debate on outsourcing and offshoring and received the Manufacturing Leadership Council's Industry Advocacy Award in 2014. He was also the Made in America 2019 Reshoring Award. He was recognized by Sue Helper, then Commerce Department Chief Economist, as the driving force in founding the reshoring trend, and he was named to the Commerce Department Investment Advisory Council in August 2019. Harry is frequently quoted in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Forbes, Financial Times, New Yorker, Washington Post, and USA Today. He's been seen on Fox Business, Market Watch, PRI, NPR, Manufacturing Talk Radio, and other national TV and radio programs. Harry received a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a Master's of Science in Engineering at MIT in 1967, and he holds an MBA from the University of Chicago that he received in 1981. We're happy to have Harry here, and with that, we'll turn it over to him. Go ahead, Harry.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Great to be back. And we tried this a couple of weeks ago, and we had some technical issues, and we're not going to have them again this time. So we're going to talk about what's happened with the supply chain and driven significantly by the COVID crisis. I want to give you just a little background on me. I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and what you see here on the slide is the Singer sewing machine factory, which back in about 1910 was the largest factory in the world. It had 2.6 million square feet, 3,000 or 5,000 employees. It was just a colossus of the time. And my grandfather was a foreman. My dad ran about a third of the factory. I worked there summers, and I drove past 20 years ago, and it was all gone. There's nothing of Singer made there anymore. Everything gets imported, and throughout my career, I sold machine tools, foundry equipment, things like that, and I saw industry after industry, company after company that disappeared, that were wiped out by foreign competition, or that decided to import almost everything and sell it here. And so I decided that something had to be done, and so I founded the Reshoring Initiative to bring back enough to balance the trade deficit, let's say 5 million manufacturing jobs. And if you look at what's happened to manufacturing, this shows the Fed data on industrial production, and at the best, the rate of growth is slowing for the last 20 years. And I think if they did the numbers accurately, you'd say that the rate has actually declined, that we're no longer growing in terms of manufacturing. And as a result of that, manufacturing share of GDP has been cut more than in half, from about 27% to about 12%. But it isn't because we're not consuming goods. We hear about being a services society, but our growth in the consumption of goods, of things, has been 2.5% a year for the last 12 years anyway, and that's faster than the rate of growth of the GDP. So it isn't that we don't consume goods. We're consuming lots of goods, more every year. It's that we don't make so much of them anymore. So we have, as a result of that, we've gone from having a trade surplus from after World War II till about 1979 that's turned into a trade deficit. So we import about $800 billion a year more than we export. That's the trade deficit, and that amount at current levels of U.S. productivity is about 5 million manufacturing jobs. So we're missing those jobs because of this trade deficit. And as a result of that, manufacturing jobs as a percentage of U.S. employment over that period have declined from about 27% to about 8 or 9%. So a significant decline, much worse than what's happened in Germany, Japan, places like that. And if you throw the last two curves together on the slide, you see a very tight correlation between what's happened with the trade deficit and what's happened with manufacturing employment. Now, the good news is that these negative trends have balanced off or flattened out, plateaued here, the last 5-10 years. But it's still not enough. We need to do much better. You might say, why did we get into this situation? Why so much offshoring? Why so much imports? Well, from a macro viewpoint, the US dollar has gone up about 300% over the last 40 years relative to our actual trade partners. And as a result, our wages, our costs, taxes, all kinds of things like that in the US are substantially higher than they would be if the dollar were not so overvalued because we have the reserve currency for the world. China, joining the World Trade Organization, added 1.3 billion of hungry, aggressive, hardworking people that wanted to produce the products, have the jobs, eat well, and become middle class. And so where people said we were opening China to the world, we really opened the world to China. China has been the predator, and we've, unfortunately, especially the US, have been the prey. Consumers have a lot of responsibility for us. They demanded the lowest price product that was of an acceptable quality, and too many of them chose to go to university rather than into a tool maker, welder, precision machinist, some kind of a trade or vocation. And of those who went to university, too many studied liberal arts rather than engineering. So we don't have the workforce that, for example, Germany has. In terms of the companies themselves, a lot of responsibility, very short-term focus. The U.S. invests about a third as much per year in CNC machine tools as does China, and has about a third as many robots per 1,000 workers as does South Korea, and yet those countries have significantly lower wage rates. You'd think they'd have less ability to justify automation. PDSA, excellent practice, not done enough, and not enough use of TCO. I'm going to tell you more about that, total cost of ownership. Fortunately, things are starting to get better. We talk about reshoring. Some people call it onshoring or insourcing. It's all about bringing back the production of things that will be sold or assembled here. So we don't see any likelihood that we're going to make T-shirts and ship them to China, or even automobiles very often and ship them to China. But we do think that we should be making most of the product that we consume. A related trend is FDI, foreign direct investment. Some of you may work for companies that eventually are foreign owned, but the same logic applies, that the company decides that it makes more sense, it's more profitable to produce for the US market, in the US market, rather than produce somewhere else and ship to the US market. Some people talk about localization, generally producing near the consumer. You might have heard of nearshoring, which would be to bring work back from significantly offshore, like China or India, back to, say, Mexico or Canada, to a near shore. And my first choice is the US, since I'm a US citizen, but I'd much rather have the work in Canada or Mexico than in China or India. And Mexico especially makes a lot of sense because the wage rates are about the same as the Chinese wage rates. And product made in Mexico has about a 40% US content, whereas product made in China has about a 5% US content. So getting it to Mexico or Canada is quite good for the US if we cannot get it here. Another favorable trend has been wage rates. So this chart shows indexed unit labor costs for a variety of countries. In 2000, all of them, whatever they were, indexed to 100, and then adjusted each year going forward by the change in the wage rate, the change in productivity, change in currency to get it down to a US basis. And what you see here that stands out, China is up to 500. So the cost in dollars of Chinese labor to make a thing after adjustment for their very good productivity increases is 5 times as high as it was 20 years ago. And that has, even before the trade wars, even before the virus, that was driving work out of China. And so the challenge for the US or North America is to grab as much of that work coming out of China as possible. And I'll focus on China a fair amount because China is the source of about 49–50% of the reshoring that has occurred. So it's got a huge amount of the offshoring, and now it's providing a very large amount of the reshoring. So some other reasons, e-commerce. When there's a surge in demand, you expect the product anyway, the next day or today. And if there's been a surge in demand, the replenishment of the distribution center has to happen today, tomorrow. And you can't do that very well from offshore. Automation obviously reduces the negative impact of high wages. The Trump tariffs, like love them or hate them, have definitely made Chinese products more expensive. And
is now joining.
Okay, for the Kaizen Institute, the work that you've done, the work that Lean in general has done, the work of Deming, all these things have contributed to making the U.S. Able to produce a higher quality product at a more reasonable price. And one of the events I think is especially noteworthy, the Business Roundtable, which is a group of the top CEOs in the country, on August 19th, produced a statement about the purpose of a corporation. And previous to that time, the purpose was to take care of the shareholder. And what all these CEOs, you can recognize a lot of them here, what they've now committed to is that the stakeholders include not just the shareholders, but also the suppliers, that might be probably some of you, the employees, and the community. And how better for these companies to live up to what their CEOs signed than to not offshore so much and to reshore significant portions of what they have offshored. And I'm going to show how they can do that and be equally or more profitable. So because of these favorable trends the last 10 years, the sum of the reshoring and FDI job announcements back in 2010 was about 6,000 per year, and we reached 190,000 in 2017, and then continued on at a little bit lower pace of addition, but still 110,000, 150,000 in 2018, 2019. So if you look at the national implications of this, they're substantial. I've mentioned bringing back 5 million jobs. Doing so will cut the U.S. budget deficit because there'll be less need for welfare and things like that, and less need for stimuluses and more taxes being paid. Provide material for defense. The Defense Department often talks about it can't find material, can't find products and components. We hear a lot about income inequality. Well, it's not all, but significantly, because the middle class was hollowed out so much by the decline in manufacturing. As that is rebuilt, income equality will look a lot better. It'd be a lot easier to strengthen the manufacturing workforce and to recruit when the high school counselor believes that manufacturing is once again a good career. I think there's going to be 4 million retail employees looking for jobs in a couple of years, or now certainly, but still in a couple of jobs. What better solution could we have than to have them produce the things they used to sell? Pollution comes down when you produce it here. We see a great opportunity for capital investment and for having both productivity, significant increases in productivity, and in manufacturing employment. So we can, you might say, eat our cake and have it too if we do it correctly. So we went through a period with the tariffs when people had sort of an understanding of trade deficits. And then we got to COVID-19, and all of a sudden it was emotion and fear, fear of losing a job, fear of dying, fear of your family dying. And so, and everybody on TV watched the shortages of gowns and gloves and masks and heard about us being 95% dependent on China for antibiotics and China threatening not to ship them. Horrible situations that everybody intuitively understands is absolutely unacceptable, especially for the leading country in the world. And increasingly, they're starting to understand that it is not just limited to these medical products, but also to other industries. This is rare earth minerals and products made from them, the 5G telecommunications networks, discrete electronic components, the Defense Department that I mentioned. We import 97% of the footwear and apparel that we consume. I mean, absolutely an unacceptable condition. Machine tools that I come out of, significantly dependent on imports. So if we want to rebound in some of these industries quickly, we often, and if we somehow lost access to the imports of machine tools, we can't even expand fast enough to rebound where we want to. So the companies, when we had the Chinese coronavirus came out and started in China, companies thought back and they said, the coronavirus in China, Fukushima problem in Japan, the Thai floods, the LA dock strike, our own fault, all these things hurting supply chains and delivery. The Iceland volcano that for weeks prevented air freight from coming in from Europe. So companies looked at this and said these long extended supply chains scattered all over the country just increases our risk of having a disaster on one or more of them that could prevent us from producing, assembling our product. And so it's increasingly clear that for many companies, for many products, the best solution is to have an assembly plant in the U.S. and to have, again, for supplying the U.S., not to supply all the world, but to have it in the U.S. and to have the suppliers, the supply chains, strongly linked, at least within the continent, within the country, ideally in the same town or county. Because you see what happens when Toyota comes over here and they put in an assembly plant. They put in the plant, and within a mile around them, they put their suppliers come in and build factories, and they're shipping stuff in just in time. And just the chances of a dock strike, a tornado somewhere else, whatever, is eliminated or almost eliminated. So one of the biggest problems of this, as I mentioned, is the lack of use of total cost of ownership. And this is a topic most of you should know, but surveys say that about 60%, that's 60% of companies do not use it. Instead, they just look at wage rate or purchase price, maybe landed cost. And by so doing, they're missing 10 to 20 to 30% of the total cost of offshored products. Therefore, they're often making the wrong decision. So to address this problem, we introduced the total cost of ownership estimator, which is free online on our website, again, free. And the user goes in and answers 29 questions about the domestic source, the foreign source. So in this case, the Chinese price was 70, the US price was 100. So the procurement person would say, 30% difference, $30 difference, I'm going to buy $12,000 a year. That's $360,000 of purchase price variance per year. That's a third of my objective. I'm going to get my bonus. Of course, it goes off to China. But when they did total cost and saw 98 for China, 108 for the US, and saw that within a couple of years, if the wage rate changes continued, China total cost would be higher than the US. Hopefully, they would say, it's time not to send any more off, and it's time to start planning to bring back some, not all, but some of what's off there and start to expand, find suppliers, hire and train, etc. So to understand the impact of this, I took the first 180 cases that we had where users were comparing Chinese to US sources. And the blue line shows the Chinese price as a percentage of the US price. And you can see the mode, the peak here is about 70%. So China price 70% of US, and about 8% of the cases, the US price was lower than the Chinese price, which means the Chinese price to US price ratio was above 100%. But when we switch over to total cost and then to total cost with a 15% tariff, that percentage of the work that should be produced in the US goes up to 32% and then 46%. So just by doing the math correctly, significant portions of the work are reshorable profitably. So total cost, what's in it? We break it down into hard costs and softer risk and strategic factors. So in hard costs, there's freight, there's regular duty, there's travel to see the supplier, packaging, the inventory carrying costs, the ability to do just in time or not. And then for risk, there's emergency air freight. You don't plan them, but they happen. There's the benefit of the domestic engineering team and the factory team working together to optimize both the product and the process. The value of a made in USA label, increasingly important. A lot of consumers now saying that they will spend 10%, 20% more for a made in USA product if they can find one. The risk of stocking out with a long delivery instead of short, intellectual property risk, quality differentials. So a large number of factors, all of which are quantified in the total cost of ownership estimator. So things that people have occasionally talked about, this is a method to quantify them. Here's a series of studies that have been done by others, and they come to the same conclusion that these hidden costs, which are the difference between the FOB cost and the total cost, are in the order of 15 to 25%. So you should all know Deming, and he said, stop buying on the basis of price, instead minimize total cost. So absolutely crystal clear to him, but a lot of the companies that would say that they follow his precepts or his principles have ignored this one. John Shook at the Lean Enterprise Institute said the same thing. You got to look at the total cost. And Jim Womack, who's my neighbor up here in Maine, and has been very helpful to me for this effort, says, do the lean math. He calls it lean shoring. Bring the work back, or do the math and see if you can bring it back. But when you bring it back, don't bring it back the same way that you made it before, but apply lean, Kaizen, et cetera, principles to doing it the right way. Many of you know and probably utilize the TPS, Toyota Production System. So I've listed here the 7 Toyota wastes, the Muda, and how offshoring makes each of those wastes worse. So a lot of companies do TPS, but they ignore this key aspect. SQDC, safety. The country is clearly safer if we make these things and if our people have jobs. Safety for them. Quality, China responsible for 51% of recalls. Delivery, days instead of weeks. Cost, if you do it right, 20 to 30% should come back. So doing things in that order, SQDC, we think would often conclude reshoring. Now, I came up with a concept I hope you find interesting or at least entertaining. I call it go to the whole Gemba. So we all know what the Gemba is. And often a US company will have a supplier offshore. They might own the factory in Asia, or it might be a third party contract manufacturer. And in the US factory, there's lean people, there's people doing Kaizen, and they walk the Gemba, and do the best they can. And there's perhaps somebody over in the offshore factory doing the same thing. But is either group walking the whole Gemba and trying to decide whether it makes sense to continue to be importing instead of doing it in the market where the product's going to be sold? And certainly the supplier or the lean practitioner at the offshore factory isn't doing that, because if he showed that the work should be done in the US, he probably wouldn't have a job. Okay. So there's a problem in companies of siloing. I talk repeatedly to people who try to get the procurement or supply chain people to change, and they get the story, oh, that's a warranty issue. That's not in my budget. Oh, too much inventory, huh? I don't know, talk to the inventory people. Oh, you lost orders because of delivery. Well, I bought the cheapest product. That's not my job so much. So if necessary, you have to go around procurement and create allies in those other departments and get them to work with you to convince the general management, to convince the procurement department to take responsibility for the overall needs of the company instead of just minimizing the price. So we recommend the use of TCO, total cost, for the bigger companies, those who do import, to buy smarter or to site smarter, like where you put your factory, and for the suppliers, people who sell up to other companies, to sell smarter. And I'll give you a little more on that. So if I'm at a company and they've said, okay, Harry, tell me, give me some advice. I tell them, I don't tell them to reshore. I tell them to reevaluate, and to do it in their own self-interest and in the interest of their society, their employees, their community, and to pick logical parts, gather data, run total cost, and for the ones that are clear winners, implement them because it's in the company's own self-interest, because they'll be equally or more profitable, and because they'll strengthen this community, the country in which they live. So part of that starting process is to find products that cause pain. So I've listed some of these issues that I call pain, like long deliveries, lost orders, too much inventory, travel, late night telephone calls, all these issues. And so if I'm at a company, I'll ask, tell me about parts where you're having one or more of these issues, and then I'll find the people that are responsible for that functionality, like having the right amount of inventory, salespeople not happy with lost orders, engineers that have to travel too much, and get them to support my effort to convince management to recognize the pain that they have and reshore. We say you can empower your people if you get them started reevaluating, and then find your natural allies. You can make this happen. Here are some a list of negative factors, negative issues that we've identified. So we've tracked thousands of cases of reshoring and FDI, and these are the things that for reshoring that were wrong offshore, that were negative offshore. And I've put in red the ones that Kaizen, lean, quality can address. And therefore you can tend to drive the work back to the US by helping the companies see that these problems can be overcome. Now, I've listed here the positive factors, the things that went right here, the things that drove the work into the US. And if you notice at the bottom, I've listed lean and other business process improvement techniques, and only 99 cases. So my conclusion is that although lean processes and process improvement should be an important part of bringing the work back, it doesn't happen often enough. It isn't used enough, certainly isn't mentioned enough in the cases that report these things happening. So there's an opportunity, I believe, for all of you to be more active in that regard. Here's my favorite case, a company called Moricorp they populate circuit boards. They're located outside Chicago. They came to me 6 years ago, and they had a very good customer, and a Chinese company had undercut their price, and Mori was quite sure they were going to lose the business. And so the VP sales and I did the TCO estimator. Tony took that into the customer, showed the customer that even though Mori's price was higher, the total cost from the customer's perspective was lower, and Tony credited that with saving a $60 million order. And I probably should have asked for a commission, but at least I have the right to tell the story. And I hope you could find some similar cases. So we offer a program called the Import Substitution Program, which can help you make this happen with your customers. So if you work with us and you identify the products that you're really good at making. You know, not I can make anything the size of a bread box, but a product that you're really good at making, then we can tell you who the biggest importers of those products are, and then you can go to them, and knowing whom they're buying them from, what they're buying, how many tons a year they're buying, and you can then use total cost to convince those customers, in some cases, that they should be buying from you instead of continuing to import. Some other ways you can win. We have a National Metalworking Reshoring Award. There's also a National Sewn Products Reshoring Award. You can find them both on our website. The 2020 contest is closed, but the 2021 will open soon. You'll be able to find it on our website. And if it's either metalwork, any kind of machining, forming, additive, welding, any of these things are relevant. FDI also, but you have to have reshored or done FDI. We think there's opportunities here for cooperation. Love to cooperate with you on incorporating total cost in your work, getting you to become a lean TCO expert. We'd love to get some companies who have reshored and would help us quantify the savings that they achieve from reshoring, because it'll be the more cases where we can prove at a detailed level that this works, the easier it'll be to convince companies to do it. We want to document cases. We say there were 117,000 last year. Well, there's probably another 50 that we didn't find. So we're thinking about offering with AME, Association for Manufacturing Excellence, a TCO certificate. So if anybody thinks that's a good idea, you want to send me an email or tell me it's a bad idea, whichever is the case, I'd be happy to hear from you. But at the moment we're working on doing that. There's an archived webinar that's linked here, and you can find it on our website under videos. So an archive webinar specifically with training on total cost of ownership. And so we hope that you'll take advantage of that. And again, anybody that's interested in the certificate, please contact me. We're a nonprofit. We have sponsors. AMT puts on IMTS, the big machine tool show that didn't happen this year or isn't happening this year, unfortunately. I love it, but I'm missing it. Gardner is Modern Machine Shop and magazines like that. DGF's a great marketing company that helps us. My old company, GF Machining Solutions, EDM, high-speed milling, things like that. Wonderful company. And then a series of trade associations. Ellison's a machine tool distributor, excellent support of our work, and similar down through here. So we're delighted to have all these people helping us help you. So we think of ourselves a little bit like this. This is the little Dutch boy and the dike that's holding back the North Sea from Holland. And there's a hole in the dike and a little bit of water coming out, and the stones are starting to vibrate. And the little guy comes along and sticks his finger in the hole to keep the dike together, and he hopes the village elders find him. So conceptually, this little guy is Harry when Harry had hair, and you're the village elders. And if you say, well, Harry, good luck. Well, probably it's not going to get any better. But if you take the message and you use total cost and you apply these techniques, then I'm confident that the country will be stronger and the life will be better for your children and your grandchildren, which is one of the reasons that I do this. So I'm open to your questions.
Thanks, Harry. We did have a request from Aldo. Could you go back? I think it's slide 30. You talked about the waste. Could you just run through that one again?
Tell me, Ben, where do you want me to go back to?
I think it's slide 30.
Okay, I'm going to try that. See if we can do it. Actually, don't want to do that. Let me get it back. Okay. Let's see if we can get there. Here's There's
That's
29. There's 30.
No, it's the one. It's 29.
Okay. Okay.
So Ronaldo was just asking if you could go through this again, the samples of the waste that happen when you offshore.
Okay. Please do. I appreciate the interest. And I don't know. Are you going to make the slide deck available to people that want it?
We are going to be putting this presentation on YouTube when we're done.
Okay, great. But anybody that really wants it and wants to use the slides, they can email me and I'll send you the slide deck and you can use it. So total waste, the 7 MUDA, you all know, overproduction. Typically, the foreign supplier, China, what have you, wants to fill a container. So instead of sending in a small quantity once an hour, once a day, once a week, they're sending in a large quantity once every 2 weeks or once a month or once a quarter. There's waiting. Obviously, there's time involved in at the port, in customs, in travel time, et cetera. There's just time that's gone. The transportation, obviously, significant miles inbound, and then a return of a boat half full because we import so much more than we export. The over processing, more packaging and unpacking, customs paperwork, just actions that don't have to happen if we're buying from the plant down the street. Inventory, we estimate to be on average twice as high for finished goods inventory if you import. In the case, going back to that Mori case, they had a housing that they were buying from China and they had a quality issue. Customer forced them to find a domestic local supplier, and their inventory of the product came down by 94%. Now, I'm not going to promise 94% for every action, but I think it'll be a very reasonable estimate to cut it in half. And again, I'd love to hear of any cases where you've reshored and can confirm that for me. But if you look at the causes of inventory, safety stock, cycle, in transit, et cetera, it's very easy to come up with 50%. Motion, Asia still has lower productivity, and therefore there's more human motion involved in making the thing, and clearly there's more defects. Now, not as bad as, say, 20 years ago. The Chinese especially have improved their quality substantially, but still they represent about 51% of product recalls. So I think it's a fair statement, and I hear lots of cases of companies where some of the managers bemoan the problems they've had because of imported product defects.
Thanks, Harry.
Yeah.
Also, we've just had another question come in. How can we educate the average person and customer to also think in terms of TCO instead of price tag? What do we need to do for education?
Yeah. Have them watch the webinar. I guess it'd be good. I guess you have to say, that's why I have that pain slide. I think you don't start with TCO. You start with, tell me about products where you're having issues or pain, problems, things that are causing you personal or business pain or discomfort, and then your action is to help that pain go away, and they'll say, well, yeah, it's bad that I have to travel so much. It's tough that we have some quality issues, but the price is so much lower. It's 30% lower. I can live with the pain to get the 30%. And then you say, well, now let's use total cost and see if the total cost is actually any lower. And if you can have equivalent total cost and get rid of the personal irritation and the business losses, then wouldn't that make sense? Yes. Okay, let's do the total cost of ownership analysis. See, so you don't sell total cost. I think you sell pain elimination or problem elimination, and TCO is a tool to achieve that.
Thanks, Harry. Maybe just for a moment, maybe you could go back to the slide that has your contact info on it.
Okay.
And I'll invite others that are attending that if you have questions, please feel free. You can either type them into the meeting chat like Reynaldo has been doing, or you can unmute yourself and ask the questions live. In the meantime, I've got a couple others that have been sent in. Harry, how about skilled workforce availability? Is that an issue with reshoring?
I get if at a live meeting, I always get asked that, and it's a fair question. And so, everybody, many analysts, prior to the COVID mess, were saying we were going to have a 2 million manufacturing worker shortfall by 2025 or something like that. So it's a fair question, but a major reason we don't have the needed skilled workforce is because the guidance counselors, the students, society has told all the kids that manufacturing is all going offshore. Why would you want to manufacture? And that everybody needs to get a university education. And by visibly showing that reshoring is happening, if I lived in Cleveland, I would get together all the companies and say, all of you, when you reshore or do FDI, report it on the website, and once a month we'll do a press release to the TV station, the radio station, the newspaper if there's still one there, and get them to publish all the cases of reshoring so the guidance counselors and the kids would know what's happening. And when Susie said, what do you think about me becoming a welder instead of going to university, that the guidance counselors say, hey, that's a great idea. There's a big demand for welders out there. Why don't you do that? Manufacturing is coming back. So I think there's things like that we can do. It's not going to be easy. We don't have enough engineers. We don't have enough welders and precision machinists. But every other country in the world. I was at a meeting of International Special Tooling and Machining Association. I was a vice president. It was about 10 years ago, and every country, from U.S. and Germany down to emerging countries, said, all our kids want to go to university. They want to study art and music and philosophy. They don't want to become tool makers and welders anymore. So you got the same problem around the world. So it isn't like they've got it perfect and we've got to be perfect to compete. Even in Germany, the apprenticeship programs are declining. And so if we can go from where we are to pretty good, it'll make a hell of a difference.
Thanks, Harry. I have another one. Will automation end up increasing or decreasing the number of jobs in North America?
Yeah, we say it will increase the number of jobs, and our throwaway line on this, which you're all welcome to use, is that the U.S. will lose more jobs to Chinese automation if we do not automate than it will to U.S. automation if we do. So it isn't like we can build a wall around the country and say, well, we only want to make so much things. If we automate, it's going to take fewer people. Instead, we've got the whole world to compete with. And like I said, the Chinese, the Koreans, automating a lot faster than we are. The average German machine tool is about a third newer than the average American machine tool. And so if we don't do it, we will not go from a condition where we are right now, which is our prices are too high, which is why we have the big trade deficit, that we will not overcome that problem. In fact, it'll get worse because the other people are automating, and our trade deficit will grow. Our number of manufacturing jobs will shrink. So automation is one of the necessities. We call on the government to get the dollar down by 20% or so, to have much better skilled workforce, to keep the corporate tax rate where it is, not let it go up again, to support innovation and things like that. But automation is absolutely an essential part of it.
Thanks, Harry. We do have another question that just was just put into the meeting chat. Wouldn't being lean also be applied in that sense? China focuses on manufacturing, and North America would become a specialist in creating high-level art, philosophical ideas, and highly advanced robotics or automation and creation of quantum computers. So sort of the idea of that is China just manufactures the simple stuff, and we do all the, North Americans do all of the more complex stuff.
Well, a couple of things. First, you talked about automation or advanced manufacturing or making the high-tech products. First, at the moment, we have a significant trade deficit in high-tech products. If the government has a list of industries that you can sort imports and exports by tech level, and we have a significant trade deficit in high tech. So what the person is asking about certainly is not happening. It's going the absolute opposite of that. And then one question would be, why is that happening? And there's a lot of synergy from having engineering and manufacturing together in one place, in one language, one time zone, working together on the problem. And the US has lost that. The consultants came in and said, stick to your core competence, which is marketing and finance, and let the manufacturing be done by somebody else. And when and maybe product design, marketing, finance, product design. And when you don't do the manufacturing anymore, it's been well documented that most companies cannot do the engineering well, because you need the two of them to work together. So I think the hopes of making high-end products without a broad industrial competence, not going to happen. Hasn't happened, definitely isn't going to happen. And if you need a breadth of manufacturing, steel, aluminum, castings, machining, all these kind of things, or you'll be I don't know what, a Bali, it will become either a place for people to go for tourism, or eventually the dollar will collapse to the point where the Chinese send their simple, dirty work to be produced like we did to them 30, 40 years ago.
Thanks, Eric. And another comment from the same person who just asked that question. An interesting point of view, the synergy between design and manufacturing, and he says thank you.
Okay. I guess another viewpoint, if he mentioned do art and music and things like that. You have to have somebody to buy those things, which means somebody has to have a middle income or higher to be able to afford to pay for art that's produced in a hands-on kind of way, as opposed to massive, movies and so on. And if you don't have that middle class, if you don't have the small company owners and so on, you're not going to. The Chinese aren't going to buy much of your art, or the Germans, whatever. You need a stable, solid income base of people to support the pleasures of life like that. Right.
Thanks, Harry. I do have one more question, but before I ask that question, I just let everybody know that's on the recording here, that we will be putting this recording on our YouTube channel, and we will be communicating that out to everybody who was invited to our webinar today, and to everybody who's on our newsletter list. If you are interested in getting on that list and you're not already, just feel free to reply to the email in which you received your invitation to this. So last question that I have, Harry, and that doesn't mean that we can't take others from the folks online here, but what has been happening with manufacturing employment recently? What's the trend for that?
Oh, okay. Well, very recently, like this year, obviously it's been poor because of the virus. But I've looked for, haven't found, but I'm sure that the the fall off in manufacturing employment is a lot less than in services and retail and hospitality and cruise lines and airplanes and things like that. That manufacturing it was easier to maintain COVID compliance in manufacturing, and there was more demand. So I'm sure in the short run, better than most. In the longer term, we've done a study in which we took the Department of Labor data for manufacturing employment at the end of each year, starting 25 years ago, I think, and we did a regression analysis up to just before the Great Recession, and compared that line to the subsequent years, and the result is that we now have 3 to 3.5 million more jobs than one would have predicted before the Great Recession. So I didn't include the Great Recession in the regression because that would have pulled it down and would have overstated my case. I didn't want to do that. So conservatively speaking, we're definitely up for the last 10 years, and we're higher, 3 million higher than one would have predicted 12, 13 years ago. And why is that? Because the rate of offshoring has declined dramatically. Don't hear so much about factories shutting down and work moving to other places. And the rate of reshoring and FDI, having brought back about 600, 700,000 jobs, has prevented things from getting worse. And you can see that again in remember those charts that I showed you where the manufacturing employment as a percentage of total employment and the trade deficit have both pretty well plateaued in the last 5 to 10 years. So it's as good as it's much better than one could have hoped for 10 or 12 years ago. The tough side is that in our best year, we brought back 190,000 manufacturing jobs. And to balance the trade deficit, we need to bring back 5 million more than we lose each year, or 5 million more, which means, say, 200,000 more than we lose each year for 25 years. So we need to go from bringing back 190,000 in a year to bring back 400 or 500,000 and only offshoring 100,000 or 200,000. And then in 10 or 15 or 20 years, we could balance the trade deficit. So I got a lot of work still ahead of me with your help.
Of course. Well, that reaches the end of our questions. So unless anybody has something burning, I think we can work towards closing this out. So you've got the information on your screen right now if you want to contact Harry Moser. Again, I'm Chuck. I'm with Kaizen Institute. It was our pleasure to sponsor and have Harry on here today. We will be sending out a link to our YouTube channel to everybody who's here. So you'll be able to have an opportunity to share that if you think there's folks that that need to hear this message as well. Also, you can reach us, Kaizen Institute, at www.us.kaizen.com, or you can respond to the email that contained your invitation to this webinar. So with that, thank you, Harry.
Thank you, everybody. Again, let me just say, I'm here to help. I want those 5 million jobs, and I can't do it by myself. Only you can do it. So you got the contact information. Come to me. Tell me about your reshoring successes, and let me help you achieve more of them. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.